Okay. So here we are, afternoon session. So I thought that I would explore patience in this Parami talk. Maybe it would be helpful if I reviewed our list again, just to remind you, so that you can keep this in your forefront. The Paramis are generosity, integrity, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, resolve, loving kindness, and equanimity. Sometimes they're said a little differently. Integrity is often called harmonious living, or sila. You know it all the time from Dana, Sila, and Bhavana. Generosity, harmonious living, and the meditation. So patience seems to be, at least two of you mentioned patience, so I think it's pretty fitting that, most of us live our lives in a state of constant rushing. We're always trying to get somewhere or accomplish something as quickly as possible. I won't name any names. And I promise to talk slower than you want me to. Just kidding. Maybe I should talk really fast. So, even in our spiritual practice, we can find ourselves caught up in a mindset of racing to the finish line. But when it comes to awakening, there's no rushing the process. And while the mind may want to get enlightened as soon as possible, the heart knows that the spiritual path is a journey of patience and trust. And it's through patience that we relax into the right relationship with things as they are, without causing harm to ourselves or to others. The early Buddhist teachings recognize the vital importance of patience, including it as one of the 10 paramis, an essential quality of the awakened heart. It's a steady force that supports us during times of trial and stress and dukkha. We can cultivate this noble and essential attribute and understand how it can reveal a wealth of meaning in our everyday experiences. Patience isn't gritting our teeth, or sometimes you hear people refer to it as white knuckling. We're not forcing something, forcing ourselves through difficulty or challenge. It's true that mature patience trains us in non-reactivity that helps us to be in relationship to the way things actually are without causing harm. And so I'd sort of like to explore and get to know patience a little bit, Kanti Parami, as it's called in Pali. And that's the language that some of the teachings of the Buddha was preserved in. It was sort of I believe, one of the colloquial spoken languages. Patience is one of the unsung, underappreciated qualities of the heart that's so integral to the waking process. As a parami, it helps the heart begin the process. Patience is right there, close to the surface of beginning the process. You could even think of it as a journey. It's a journey of the heart, relaxing into whatever arises and meeting it with little to no reactivity. I like to think of complete patience, Kanti Parami, as a training ground for equanimity. One time a friend wrote before going into retreat, "The conditions for awakening are there. Believe it is possible." And one of the reasons that this is so inspiring and continues to be inspiring is that we can read the suttas, we can learn about the Buddha, we can hear some of the stories of his life and his followers, and we can think awakening happened for them thousands of years ago, but that's not possible for me, as I think Jessica was mentioning. But this can be looked at differently, because these teachings, when we really take them to heart, when we take time to study and reflect on the Dhamma and really live into them, it can lead to complete freedom and complete awakening. Awakening is talked about in different ways in the various traditions of Buddhism. And one way of articulating awakening is thinking of it as a heart-mind that is free of irritation and free from the anguish of greed and the erosive nature of aversion and the life-denying quality of delusion. And since awakening is possible, it's important to remember that the seeds of awakening are in each and every human heart. Just take a moment to really take that in, that the seeds of awakening are in each and every human heart. Now you might be thinking, well, she doesn't really know me, she doesn't know what's in my heart, and that might be true, but I don't know you. Well, I sort of know Margaret. But what's also true is that I'm in the process of getting to know my own heart and mind, the beautiful qualities that are present and the not so beautiful qualities, and the unskillful that's present in my heart and mind stream. And so I'm getting to know my own heart, and I'm actually getting to know your heart, because hearts aren't really all that different. The spirit that's afoot in our times right now, the divisiveness, the zeitgeist that we're currently living in, would have us think that we're so different that we can't live with an abiding respect for each other. The truth is that these differences are just tiny, tiny variations on the same shared theme, the shared experience of being human. And the seeds of awakening are in each and every human heart. And you can think of this practice, this gradual process of awakening, as learning to tend to those seeds. So there's the conditions that result in the blooming and flowering and blossoming of the beautiful heart qualities that lead to awakening, like the qualities of the 10 Paramis. Generosity, virtue. I like to think of it as a heart that's ethically attuned, that's concerned for the well-being of all beings. Renunciation, letting go, seeing things as they leave. Wisdom, energy, patience. My current favorite, truthfulness, resolve, friendliness, kindness, and equanimity. And these qualities of the heart that are native to each and all of our hearts is transformed into the Paramis by the intention that animates them. And there are two intentions, compassion and liberation. When we call forth truthfulness or patience to support the welfare of another, or to mitigate the differences or challenges, for example, we call on that parami in the service of compassion. It starts to be transformed into perfection. The compassion is coupled with calling forth the parami to wear away at the forces of greed and aversion and delusion in the mind. When a parami is summoned, when we call on it in service of compassion and liberation, then it's transformed into the parami. It becomes more perfected. And it's not like perfectionism that we're talking about, refusal to accept any standard that's short of our idea about what perfection is. It's just, in this context, it's about bringing the noble qualities to their full maturity, to their full strength. And they're brought to their full maturity and strength by being in service of supporting compassion and liberation. So compassion and liberation are present with the Paramis. And it's said that cultivating these noble perfections takes us across the floods. And the floods are that metaphor for dukkha, all the ways that we create challenges, suffering, pain, dissatisfaction, stress, and grief for ourselves, or the people that we love, or even people that we don't even know all that well. And it's a metaphor, the floods is a metaphor for conditioned reality, the fact that all of our sensory experiences, every sight, every sound, every smell, every taste, every sensation of the body, every thought, emotion, intention, the most sublime, refined meditative states, can't give us the lasting satisfaction or the happiness that our heart longs for, and that is our birthright. And it's thought that the Buddha, over eons, during the birth and death of countless universes and innumerable lifetimes, brought these 10 noble qualities to their full fruition and their full maturity. So these 10 perfections were one of the many conditions that led to his awakening. And since the Buddha was human, just as we're human, we too can cultivate the Paramis and the perfections over many lifetimes, if you believe in the multiple lifetime model, or in this lifetime. And another thing is to talk about what patience is not. That thing of, it's not pushing forcefully through something that's difficult or unpleasant or something that's unjust. That intensity of effort is just trying to survive. And sometimes it's just waiting with aversion to the current moment while holding out hope for the better future. Complete, mature patience that's brought to its full strength helps us to be in relationship to the way things actually are without causing harm. I want to read some of the qualities and manifestations of complete patience from a teaching from a text called The All-Embracing Net of Views. One scholar who said that it can also be translated as the net of Brahma, or the divine net. So as we were just resting and receiving the 10 paramis before, when I was talking about them, just notice how these quotes land in your heart and in your mind, noticing how the mind responds to each of the quotes, and feel free to rest and receive these few images and manifestations of patience that I'm going to read. Just listen with mindfulness and without trying to reach forward to hear, just allow the words to come to the ears. One of the quotes is, "If patience were a strength, what would it be like? Summon patience, knowing that it's a strength. Patience is a strength. Patience is a stream of water, extinguishing the fire of anger. Patience is a mantra for quelling poisonous speech. What if you had a word or phrase that was an expression of patience that you held in your heart-mind, so that when you were in a challenging situation with another person, you just held that word or that image or that mantra in your mind? Patience is an ocean on account of its depth, a shore on account of bounding the great ocean of hatred. Patience is an ocean on account of its depth, a shore on account of bounding the great ocean of hatred. So patience is a beautiful quality. It's a beautiful, benevolent, beneficial quality. And some people have said, I've heard some teachers refer to the qualities of the Paramis as gems that adorn the heart and the mind. You might have experienced this. You might have seen this in your own life. You meet someone who's so dedicated to living with wisdom and compassion or kindness that the light of those qualities just shines through their inner being and radiates through their skin. And they're made beautiful by having these beautiful qualities active within their heart-mind stream. And I'm not really talking about a physical beauty. It's an inner beauty that just comes radiating through their being. So you can think of patience and its steadying power as a gem with which we'll be adorning our heart and mind. It's a gem with many facets, and 3 of the facets of patience as forbearance. There's patience as gentle perseverance. That's a phrase that Gil Fronsdale uses. And there's patience as acceptance of the truth. So here's 3 facets of patience again: as forbearance, as gentle perseverance, and as the acceptance of truth. Complete patience helps the heart to mature into non-reactivity, and it comes into its full maturity through being animated by the wish to alleviate suffering, that's having compassion, and to uproot greed and aversion and delusion, that's liberation or freedom. And these paramis are brought to life through the intention of compassion and liberation. I've been reading this book lately that I mentioned earlier. It's by Alan Locos. It's called Patience, the Art of Peaceful Living. And he is the founder and the guiding teacher of the Community Meditation Center in New York City. His first, or I don't know if it's his first book or not, another book of his that I saw first, something in the title, there's Flames is in the title. I wish I could remember the whole title, and I'm not going to run to my Kindle to find it. But I decided to pursue him because in his story about the flames, he was in Burma in the 80s, and he was flying out of Rangoon, I believe, and his airplane, however many people were on it, caught on fire, and they all went crashing. And it is the story of him surviving the flames of the fire and all of the ways that that whole situation affected him. And I don't know enough about him to know whether he was into the Dharma before that, but that was probably the beginning of his Dharma, because that was in the 80s, and that's when, most people started going to Burma or coming from Burma. So he had this book on patience. So I thought, if there's anybody that probably knows quite a bit about patience, it's someone that has survived an airplane crash, not to mention severe burns and what he had to go through during the healing process. So I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from him. If I can figure out which ones. I have a lot of pages turned down. But I think I marked a couple and put them in my notes. Let's see, what do my notes say? 126, page 24 to 26. Patience is supported and nurtured by a quality of forgiveness, understanding that others, just like ourselves, are affected by stress, disappointment, and frustration is the first step toward being able to forgive, to let it go. Forgiveness of others becomes possible as we learn to forgive ourselves. When anger, resentment, bitterness, irritation, and other such feelings take hold of us, we can't enjoy peace or a feeling of ease. When others sense our anger, and they will, they can find it difficult to trust us. Thus, we create unrest not only for ourselves, but for those around us as well. On the other hand, when we begin to conscientiously overcome our anger, happiness and inner peace will be present more often. Patience is born when we create a pause between our experience of a feeling and our response to that feeling. Without a pause, we are likely to find ourselves reacting in our conditioned manner. After all, that is what conditioning is. With a pause, there is at least the possibility of a more positive response. And certainly we are less likely to cause harm. Patience lives in the gap between our experience of an event and our response to that experience. If we spend time with our experience, the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that arise, we can gain insight. Wisdom arises as we see things with greater clarity. Forgiveness has space to develop. Fires have a chance to cool. The cooling of the mind. Let's see which other one I want to read. I think there might be one more. Happiness, inner peace, and patience begin with taming the mind. The mind's incessant tendency to jump from thought to thought, feeling to feeling, can be brought under control. We do not have to be governed by the mind's random nature. Make the practice of mindfulness the ground upon which you will build greater patience and inner peace. Commit to taking time each day to sit down, even for a few minutes, to practice detailed awareness of the workings of your mind. Just be aware, don't judge. It is a sophisticated skill and takes time to learn, but even your initial efforts can yield benefits. Let go of thoughts that will lead to dukkha and welcome the thoughts that will lead to happiness. While ultimately patience is practiced in the company of others, the starting place is in your own mind. Okay, one last little section here. Patience as a way of life. Whether or not you choose to work with the above practices, you deserve the joy and ease of peaceful living. This can be the ground for your entire life experience. Meditation is an essential practice for millions of people around the world, but it certainly is not the only path to joy and inner peace. Whatever your chosen way, it will be challenged by the constantly rising and receding tides of human experience. The vicissitudes, disruptions, and anomalies that are woven into the fabric of life, along with joys, beauty, and delights. That is just the way things are. Meditators know that life is not lived only on the cushion. We need to integrate our developing insights into our everyday activities. These practices can specifically support the integration of patience into our relationships and daily endeavors. Generosity, for instance, is viewed as having a direct correlation to patience because the time we commit to our practice is considered a great gift we give ourselves and our loved ones. Generosity is seen as an antidote to greed and clinging, which cause so much of our dukkha. When aspiring students came to the Buddha, he taught them about generosity first before teaching them meditation. Living a moral life, harmonious living, sila, begins with a heart open and responsive to the needs of others. Often we must be particularly patient with the needs of those physically or mentally challenged. And he talks for a little while about living in New York City and having buses, etc., etc. I think I'll skip that part. He's giving a couple of examples, like while driving a car, you could let someone in ahead of you. Notice how it feels to be generous and patient, even at the cost of arriving at your destination a minute or two later. Not only do we enjoy greater ease, but it makes us more welcoming presence in the world. We can reframe our approach to generosity from, all right, I know I have to make a donation, how little can I get away with giving, to now I have an opportunity to be generous. I want to give as much as I can. That slight shift in thinking can be so significant. It is no longer about me and my needs. The heart and the mind become spacious and less constricted. You are encouraging a generous spirit within and allowing compassion to flourish more easily. Taking time to consider and respond to the needs of others is a beautiful way to develop patience. Here's a nice quote I think I'll end on. When you are inspired by a great purpose, all thoughts break their bonds. The mind transcends limitations. Consciousness unfolds in every direction, and you find yourself in a new, unbounded, and glorious world. You realize yourself to be a greater person by far than you ever imagined you could be. Patanjali, India, 250 BC. So I think with all of that being said, we should take some time to actually sit and let some of these words flow through so that we're not just having to think and listen, but we can actually have the practice of generosity to ourselves and patience as we see clearly what's rising moment to moment, and it's sometimes not what we want it to be, and we have expectations. So I'm going to ring the bell and let us just take some time to sit. Let yourself feel comfortably seated. Let your eyes close gently. Notice your breath. Notice tensions in the body. Let them release as much as you can.